Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
With something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. Faith in religion isn't the only element at or near an all-time low in America. So is faith in American institutions. A recent Gallup poll showed faith in the presidency, the Supreme Court, Congress, and large technology companies are at all-time lows. Observers say that masks an even more serious trend, the willing embrace of demonization and fearmongering, the drive to destroy and to gain power by any means possible. That trend, that orientation, is called nihilism. In this episode of Challenge 2.0, Seattle area faith leaders address that trend, its foundations, its cost, and constructive responses. The 2008 Batman movie, The Dark Knight, is being held up as a case study of nihilism and its twisted attractiveness to a growing number of Americans. Psychologists point to the character of the Joker, as played by the late Heath Ledger, as an icon of moral and political nihilism in the modern age. Perhaps the best summation comes from a line delivered by actor Michael Caine, who played Batman's butler, Alfred.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
So it's been entirely too long, but we're so pleased to have Rabbi Olivier Ben Chaim with us from Bet Aleph Meditative Synagogue in Seattle and Reverend Dave Brown from the Presbyterian Church. As we look at our topic, as we look at the description of what's called nihilism, the characterization that was expressed in the opening quote that we just had, The Dark Knight, do you believe it's an exaggeration to say that that represents at least part of what we're seeing in America right now? Olivia, I might begin with you.
I think it does, unfortunately. I'm afraid to admit that to be the case. I think it's still very much on the fringes of our society. I don't think it represents the overwhelming majority of Americans today. I don't think there is a sense that Americans as a whole want to watch the world burn. Quite the opposite, I would say. But there is, unfortunately, I believe, in the extremes of our political spectrum on both sides, there is definitely a growing group of people who have that nihilistic perspective and wanting to act upon it. Unfortunately, we need to admit that. The first step is to recognize what is. So, break free from the denial and recognize that this is in fact the case. Yes.
Dave, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think there is a nihilism in our society that gives people who want to have power the sense of having a license to do whatever they can do to better themselves with their power. And so to allow the world to burn if it suits their needs or gives them their power, to treat people as less than human if they're in their way. There's been I think a breakdown of common courtesies and common respects, common respect between people. And I'm not exactly how we're going to rebuild that as a society. And it's probably present on both sides of the political spectrum. We're no longer teaching that there's a core value of dignity that we treat people with, and a way that political opponents speak to each other with a shared sense of each other's humanity, and that I think I've had for most of my life watching the world. And it seems like in the last 10 years that's sort of gone away. And we treat people as if they're less than human if we don't agree with them or if they're in our way. And so I do think that there are those who feel they have a license to burn down the world and dehumanize other people and there's no core teaching in our society that stops them from doing that.
Any particular incidents that spring to mind when you think about this that you think essentially serves as an icon of sorts for this trend in at least a fragment of society?
I think there are too many to name, actually.
Okay.
I'm thinking about Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, who was gunned down in broad daylight by an individual who felt that that was the way to address whatever problem he has with the system or the healthcare system. I can think of Wesley Lepatner, who was a Blackstone executive, who was also shot in, I think it was the NFL building in New York recently. From the Jewish community, we can also look at what has happened here in the United States. The young couple who was shot dead after a gala at the D.C. Jewish Museum. I can think of this man who in Colorado came to a protest to free the hostages back in June, not so far, and attacked the group mostly of older people with Molotov cocktails and makeshift flamethrowers. I mean, those are instances of people who are addressing what they see maybe a political problem, addressing a systemic problem. They're turning to violence, and they're turning to death, and they're turning to murder. So I think there are too many instances, in fact, of how we're seeing this expressing right here, right now, in our societies, in different places of our country.
You certainly also can't ignore what we witnessed on our television on January 6th, when they stormed the Capitol building, both the anger politically towards people, but also the way the police officers were treated by these protesters storming the Capitol building. They were, several have died and committed suicide because of that, and these were not politicians that you wanted to attack or agree with. These are simply police officers doing their job that were treated like less than human, that were beaten by these protesters. And we saw, you can't deny that, and at the risk of sounding political, but I think it's more humanitarian. No matter what you think about deporting undocumented people, the images we see about how we're going about doing that as a country is treating these people as if they're not people, that's a tragic thing.
Yeah. I think of the example also with the subject that you just raised, Dave. I believe it was a younger Presbyterian minister that was witnessing on behalf of the people that had been seized by ICE, and they shot him with pepper balls or something of that sort.
One of the pastors at Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah, and we can also see it in in the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
I mean, I have very little in common with Charlie Kirk, but that doesn't mean that I should, get a rifle and assassinate him. And specifically when he was, in his own way, sharing his own ideas, but reaching to people and meeting people, and that's what we're talking about. How do we try to reconnect with each other? How can we get to a place where even if I disagree vehemently with your political opinions, I can still come and listen to you? And he was really trying to reinvigorate that part of, what we were just talking about, of that loss that we've had, our inability to listen to each other, and he paid with his life. So it's the political violence is also, we've seen it in the last few years.
And nihilism that you referenced philosophically means basically there is no God, there is no innate order, so you're free to do whatever you want to do. And there are other philosophical schools apart from our faith traditions, existentialism, which also doesn't believe that there's a God or a divine order, but rather than saying that makes you free to do whatever you want to do, they say now we are free to create an order and a system to enable us to be human. And there's humanism which again erases the spiritual lives that Olivier and I really cherish, but does say the dignity of humanity is at the center of our life together and lifting up that dignity.
Exactly.
But we've seen the growth of nihilism, which is anything goes, rather than embracing the freedom of existentialism or the dignity of humanism.
Some of the stories that both of you shared in terms of examples come down to the idea of extrajudicial justice, sort of exemplified by the Batman Joker quote that we ran at the very beginning, sort of an acceptance of vigilante justice, that there's a lack of faith that you can expect justice, sometimes an odd version of justice, but a sense of justice nonetheless, and that if you don't get it from the institutions, you're fully free to go out and seek it on your own. And I think the FBI has actually even come up with a new category of terrorist that I have to check my notes, nihilistic violent extremist. That seems to track with what you've seen. As you provide counsel and advice to people within your own faith communities and just others that seek you out as people of wisdom, how have you encountered that either in the direct stories that you're hearing or in their life experiences that they're sharing with you?
What I've encountered in some of my interactions and counseling conversations has been a weird kind of Christian nihilism. People who believe within the Christian household that Jesus died for them and saved them, and feel therefore they really have a license to do whatever they want to do because they are forgiven by the blood of the cross. And so this approach, and I've had people come to me because of this in their family, so they'll have a violent parent or somebody who is blatantly racist but believes they're washed in the blood of the Lamb and they don't feel that carries with them any mandate to a particular lifestyle. And it's a complex problem, but it's a form of Christianity we're seeing emerging under the banner a little bit of Christian nationalism, which is an identity but that doesn't nurture compassion and humanism or empathy, but simply is a belief system that takes care of your situation of salvation and then sets you free to do whatever the heck that you want, which is not how leaders, I think, in the conservative movement necessarily want to see it, and certainly a misreading of the gospel. But I do see people really embracing that understanding of salvation as a license to do whatever the heck they want because they're saved.
What's your experience, Olivier?
Well, I think obviously from a different theology, but I think we're kind of seeing the same thing. Most of what I'm hearing is people who have who've kind of losing their foundation on truth and morality. I give you an example. Just a few months ago, I started to have little conversation. I was looking to do a workshop, and I like to put fillers in the community to see what are people thinking about. And a lot of people came to me and said, can you do a course on Jewish ethics? Like there's a real sense that this is slipping from their fingers. And I think, nihilism springs a lot from the disappearing of truth or of moral truth specifically. And in the world we live in is a world that is, some people have called it post-truth. And it's a really it's a very dysfunctional way of being, and especially our generations who have grown up in certain kind of understanding of morality, of ethics, of, as you were talking about, of how we relate to each other, common decency, right? And this is all being eroded faster than you can say eroded.
Right.
And I think what people are yearning for is that sense of, okay, what's truth? And I'm thinking out loud here, but we've seen also a resurgence of people who are turning to religion. And probably one of the reasons is that people are looking for some truth. They're like, is there still some truth that we can hold on to and have in our lives that can anchor who we are?
And fascinatingly enough, on the day we're taping this, there's a front page story in the New York Times about the return of 20-somethings to Orthodox Christian churches, which have a and especially 20-something men and boys, because they have a clear definition of what the truth is, and people are being drawn to that, and that's fascinating, and that is also something I've experienced firsthand. Two young people in my life that I knew or know have left the progressive congregations that I've been associated with and have been drawn to Orthodox churches. And one of them I asked, and we're not related, but I said, what was behind this? I said, well, I went and there was no God in the service. I heard all about diversity and inclusion and all about, what we need to do for the least of these, but I really didn't hear about God. I didn't hear about the truth of our faith. And they ended up moving to a Greek Orthodox church, which is filled with that traditional faith language. And I think that might be why some young people are leaving us to go into more traditional churches.
Yeah. I think, if I may.
Sure.
In the evolution of consciousness, it's been mapped out that we go, all of us in our younger age, move from egocentric to ethnocentric and then world-centric. It's a 3-stage process that all of us have to move through in the process of our growing up. Egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric. And I think we are trying to skip over the ethnocentric part. So you have a lot of egocentric that are trying to make it to world-centric, and they're not really wanting to look at ethnocentric. And that to me is also maybe the correlate or the problem of belonging. Like we don't know who we belong to, what we belong to. What is our tribe? What is our tribe? And we need to have a space in our lives where we can, for a few years, as part of our evolution, I belong to this family, who belongs to this community, who belongs to this tribe, who belongs to this nation. Okay, that's good. From there, you can transcend that. You can move to world-centric, but you need to have a really good grounding in your ethnocentric self. And I think we're trying to skip over some. We're jumping over some stages of evolution that are becoming pathological because you can't do that.
Any thoughts in terms of how you do that then?
From my tribe is the only tribe, to cross the river, to say my tribe is one tribe among many, and my tribe, there's a little time of fear when you move from exclusivity to inclusivity. And I think without having community, which you referenced very well, and the bombardment of media and all of the things that are happening in our world, living with that fear that comes with discovering something new is hard. And I've had lots of people in my work in interfaith say, yes, I'm just afraid of losing my faith if I follow that interfaith road.
Right. It's how do you reach the universal without denying the particular?
That's correct.
Right. In our tradition, the way this is shown, this is felt, is that maybe we have a little advantage. We've been a 3,000-year-old tribe, so it's very pronounced in us. But also I'm also seeing a lot of people who are turning back, also in Judaism, the same as in Christianity, to more orthodox ways or conservative ways of practicing their faith. From that universal consciousness, they need to source themselves back into, give me the ethnocentric level. I want to root myself back into my lineage, and there is a sense that lineage is being rediscovered or re-embraced. It will be interesting to see where that leads, because on the other side of that, I see a lot of people who lack a tribe, people who actually don't feel that they belong here or there. They don't feel particularly American, for example. There's an embrace also in maybe in trying to find a different truth or different tribalistic group in the political realm as well. And in a lot of ways, political parties are almost becoming religious, you know, and conservative or orthodox religious.
Yeah, to use Jeff's initial topic, people see the nihilistic world, the world where there seems to be no core values, there is no God. To go back to Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, without God, all things are lawful.
Nietzsche.
And people living in that, and Nietzsche, and they're looking for a tribe, and I think people are looking for who am I, and so am I whoever I want to be in this nihilistic world, or is there some core identity I can find? And I think they're being attracted to places that answer the who am I question.
Yeah, I think it's who am I, but also, again, I keep harking back to this, but where do I belong? I think it's both and. It's who am I, but where do I belong? I think there's a really deep crisis in that, where people don't have a sense of where do I belong?
And the substitute that we often see arising is provided by social media and so forth that doesn't offer the same contact, connection that you get from associating with other people in person.
I think we've seen the limits of online communities. We've been, COVID was 2020, it's been almost 6 years. I think we're seeing the limit of that. I mean, there's so much you can build online, and I'm sure there are people that have been extremely successful, but overwhelmingly, I think people who engage in online communities find that it's lacking. There is a personal connection that is not there, and I'm seeing right now in my community a yearning for coming back in person, to see each other, to hear each other, to hug each other, to have dinner with each other. I think that's also going to, I think it's coming back.
It's also been put out that there is essentially 3 stages that societies go through on a repetitive basis: order, then disorder, and then reorder. And we've been talking about the movement from order to disorder. I guess to conclude this, a question might be, can this lead to a more positive reorder? And can you leave us with any examples of where you're beginning to see that emerge? You've suggested some by that desire to come together, but any others that you'd care to share?
Deep within me, I have the hope that we will reorder ourselves in a more humane way after this period of disorder. I don't want to be naive about that deep hope. We have some major stumbling blocks ahead of us. We have not faced disorder with the kind of technology that we have today, and the role of media today, and the challenge of AI today. And so deep within my spiritual being, I believe eventually we will find a new way of being a human community and of combating nihilism. But I don't say that lightly, and at times I say it with a whole lot of doubt. But I want very much to believe it.
I wish I had a crystal ball and able to tell you what this nation will be in 5 years, in 10 years, what the Western world will be in 5 years or 10 years. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of how much change AI is going to bring at all levels of our society and our world. And so I think this world we live in will look completely, radically different by the end of this decade. And the end of this decade is 4 years away. And so it's not, but it's because it's just happening at breakneck speed, and we haven't started to see. I mean, we started to see the consequences of AI in our society already, and not just in the crisis of isolation, but also we're going to see issues with in the marketplace and employment issues. And I think there is a great darkness in front of us. in the sense that we are faced with a world we don't know. But I don't want to be a seer or prognosticator. I don't think we know. I think 5 years from now, we'll see what emerges.
Those of us in faith traditions or that have a deep sense of spiritual groundedness that makes us believe that we're going to find our way, that can never be an excuse for the denial of the darkness of this time. And the pain that we're going to have to go through as a society before we find something new or find a new way of being human together. And one of the worst things that we can do, those of us that are grounded in faith traditions or who understand ourselves as spiritual but not religion, is use that spirituality and that faith in the future as a way of blinding ourselves to the pain of the present. We have to live together with the harshness of this reality and a distant hope that it will get better.
Our work as spiritual leaders is going to be to stand our ground in truth, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Those are, still core values that we need to be the beacon for, no matter what the world is doing around us.
We are actually going to continue this conversation, but in a slightly different direction, in what will be our episode next week. So we thank both of you, and we thank you for joining us in this episode of Challenge 2.0, and invite you to join us again next week for part 2 on this topic. Thank you so much.